This is our couple's trip to Munich. When we first arrived in Munich, I couldn't see us hanging out here at all. I mean, as soon as we arrived, I felt like it was like New York City. I mean, it had this vibe that was like the city that never sleeps. It was drastically different than Salzburg, where we had just come from. So I was kind of skeptical that maybe Munich was not going to be our thing. It proved me wrong in the end because I ended up loving Munich. It was around 5 o'clock when we got to Munich, so maybe that had something to do with it, and I was super starving.
Although I don't know why I was hungry, because I had a coffee out of a waffle cone in the morning. I had a huge cream-filled powdered donut, and at the train station I had an amazing stew from a restaurant at the train station in Austria called Johann. So not really sure why I was super hungry. Maybe it was the travel.
So by the time we arrived at our hotel, it was 45 minutes from the train station, and that route, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe we should have stayed closer to the train station, but it ended up being a really good location. It was just, we were super tired, and when we got there, a ton of people were in line, ready to check in. It was one of those Marriott locations where two hotels were connected together, and so there were a lot of people waiting to check into the hotels.
We stayed in the Heidhausen area of Munich. This is basically a residential area that had a lot of nightlife, and it was easy access to a lot of stuff.
So while it seemed crowded when we got there, it really wasn't the entire time that we stayed there. It was a place that I would stay again, especially in our side of the hotel, because our side of the hotel was way quieter, and there was a gigantic breakfast buffet that connected the two hotels together, and it was one of the best breakfast buffets that I've ever been to in the United States or out of the country. So that was a really good aspect of the hotel. Plus, it was super clean, the staff was super friendly, and it was a quiet location. And it proved that location on foot proved that it was the place for us to stay, because we were able to walk to a lot of other places. And so that evening, the first thing we did after we got settled in was that we took a walk to an upscale restaurant. It was quite a trek, and so we were a little warm by the time we arrived, and it was warmer inside the restaurant, so that didn't really help. But the food was delicious. I would definitely recommend going there. It was a meat and potatoes kind of place, so it was definitely our kind of vibe of a restaurant.
And this broccolini was probably the best broccolini we've ever had. But why salads in Germany and Italy have no dressing on them is beyond me. It's just really gross. In America, we gotta douse everything.
And then we took a leisurely stroll back to our hotel, and we just had an amazing time in our first night in Munich. The next morning, we woke up to a beautiful sunrise across the sky from our Juliet balcony. I had copious amounts of espresso from the espresso machine in the lobby before we had our first delicious free breakfast at the hotel. I mean, honestly, like I said before, it really is one of the best free spreads I've ever seen. And I wish Marriott would do this more often in all of their hotels in the United States, because we do travel to a lot of Marriott hotels in the US. So, but it was a pretty amazing spread, and I think it represented the country well. I think it got the German vibe for sure. After we were done, we walked to one of the largest parks in the world and spent most of our day there discovering all kinds of historic monuments, and we discovered a lot too along the way. And we also walked around the river, and we just had an amazing romantic time in one of the largest parks in the world. One of the things we did notice is that there's seems to be graffiti everywhere. If you know why, please let us know in the comments why there's graffiti everywhere in Germany. But yeah, we were at the Englischer Garten and the Isar River. We walked around the Isar River in the Englischer Garten, and it really is the most popular river in Germany along through the English Garden. We had no idea when we set out for the day anything about this massive and beautiful park. I had set our path to check out the Maximilianeum, Maximilianeum, I think that's how you say it. A massive Renaissance revival building built in 1857. I'm a huge fan of revival buildings and architecture, and this thing was huge and it was massive, and we were checking it out, totally into it, and then we turned around to discover a river and a pathway going down to the river, and then later on discovered this was the Iser River and the English Garden, and we just had an absolutely lovely day. I mean, and that's mostly how we ended up spending our day until we Google mapped our way to the famous beer hall, the Hofbrauhaus Brewery. I think that's how you say it, the Hofbrauhaus. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. And everybody kept telling us to go here, and I kind of didn't want to go. I wasn't super psyched about going. I thought it was going to be a tourist trap, and maybe it is a tourist trap, but we genuinely had a really good time. We couldn't understand one word anyone else was saying, and I thought that made for part of the enjoyment. I mean, sometimes it's hard to have a conversation with the people you're with when you can hear everyone else's conversation, and it's kind of like interrupting your thoughts about what you're saying. But since we couldn't understand anything, there really wasn't any interruptive thoughts. I would highly recommend going to the park, going to the Iser River, and going to the Hofbrauhaus Brewery. On our third day in Munich, we visited the old town where the famous clock, the Glockenspiel, is. It's a large, massive mechanical clock in Marienplatz Square. This clock tower dates back to 1908 with 43 bells and 33 mechanical wooden figures that chime 3 times a day. I mean, it's really very cool, but there's lots of other cool historic sites around here too. I mean, tons of cool architecture. I mean, stuff that you just don't see in the United States. I mean, this square is from 1108 or something like that. I mean, it's been around for a long time, so we just don't have that kind of history in the United States. So I would highly recommend going to this area. And definitely spend a ton of time in the heart of the city. If we go back, I will definitely be going back to this main square. So that was how we spent our time in Munich. Just basically a lot of tourist stuff on foot. I mean, we did have to take a ride to get to Marienplatz, to get to that downtown area, but it was on our way back to the train station because we needed to get back to Frankfurt, because after all, my husband and I are in Germany on this trip for him to work the 2 American football games. And so that's why we were in Germany. And so we were spending our day in Munich, spending our time in Australia. And so we had to get back to Frankfurt. So that was our time in Munich. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe and share our channels with others. In our next video, we'll be back in Frankfurt.